Today is Mission Sunday. The word mission comes from the Latin word missio, which means to send. You probably don't remember, you weren't around, but in the old Latin Mass, the Mass ended with ite missa est, which meant go, the Mass is ended. The idea was the Mass is ended, missa est. The Mass is ended now, go out and do your job. We do have a job to do as Christians. Our job is to bring God into the world and to make God visible to others in our words and in our actions. Pope Francis, in a recent writing, spoke about the church. Its very essence is missionary or evangelical. Its purpose is to share the vision of Christ, the vision that Jesus had with the whole world. And this is crucial to setting up the kingdom of God, the reign of God here in the world. What is this vision that Jesus had that we are to spread? I think we can get some idea of that from the gospel today. In the gospel, when Jesus was questioned about should they pay the tax to Caesar, he asked, whose image is on the coin? Having your image on something means that you own it, you're in possession of it, you control it, you determine how that thing is to be used. The coin had Caesar's image on it, he made it, and so he set the rules for using it. The corollary of that is that we have God's image in us. We are made in God's image. If you remember the first creation story in Genesis, it said, God created mankind in his image. In the image of God, he created them. He created them male and female. Caesar made the coins, and they enabled the work of the empire. They enabled the life of the citizens to take place. God makes us in his image, and we're called to enable God's empire, to make real the kingdom of God, the reign of God. The first reading mentions Cyrus, who was a Persian king. He was not a Jew. He didn't know God. The reading said that. But he was made in the image of God, because all people are. And God used him to send the Israelites back to the promised land. And Cyrus even paid to rebuild the temple. Then we have the people of Israel. They too were made in God's image. They were even chosen to be God's special people, the chosen people. And Israel had a covenant with God to establish the reign of God in their time. The problem was the religious leaders at the time of Jesus were not doing that. And that's why Jesus criticized them so strongly in the gospel stories that we had the last 3 weeks. And then we have us. We too are made in the image of God. We too bear the image of God. And now we are sent to build up the reign of God, the kingdom of God. Our role may not be as dramatic as that of Cyrus, but we can still be the ones that God sends to make the kingdom real. Anne Lamott is a really creative and insightful author. I've read a couple of her books, and in one of her books she tells the story of an Alaskan bartender. She said a man in a bar in Alaska is talking to the bartender, and he said, my snowmobile broke down, and I was sure, right in the middle of a blizzard, and I was sure I was going to die. I prayed and prayed for God to help me, but God didn't answer me. And the bartender said, but you're here, you're alive. The man said, sure, thanks to 2 Eskimos who happened to come by. Well, we ourselves today might be one of the Eskimos that God sends to help people. There is a very good meme that I ran across that presents that idea very well. When you have a chance to do good, do it. You might be God's answer to someone's prayer. In ancient times, the various gods were seen as territorial. They were connected with and had power only in their homeland, their home country. And so when the Israelites were taken into captivity in Babylon, they assumed that their God was left behind in Israel. But then in their captivity, Israel learned that God was not back there in Israel, but he was with them and was helping them to return from Babylon to Israel. God became known to them and God helped them through Cyrus. And now today in 2020, God has become known to modern day people in the people that God sends to help us with our needs. Maybe the equivalent of today's Eskimos are the exhausted medical staff in ICU units around the world who are caring for COVID-19 patients. And maybe today's Eskimos are the delivery people who are bringing medicines to the elderly and people confined to their homes. Maybe they are the clerks who are stocking the shelves in the supermarkets so that we can continue to eat. Maybe they are the volunteers who are collecting food and boxing it up to take it to all the recently unemployed. They are the Cyruses and the Eskimos that God is sending today. What about us? Are we like Cyrus and the Eskimos for the people in need around us? Jesus speaks of what we owe Caesar and what we owe God. We owe the government a concern for the common good and obedience to just laws. That common good is the theme of Pope Francis's recent encyclical. And that same concern for the good of all, that's the concern of the government, but it's also the concern of God. And so we owe God our work because we bear the image of God. We are sent now to make that concern for the common good something real in the world today. We are called to make God's love, his compassion, his mercy, his forgiveness, to make all of that visible and available to all of God's people today. That is our mission. We need to think about that on this Mission Sunday. And if we can do that, then truly we will build up the kingdom of God.